Hello everybody, my name is Rob Dunn, fresh from Spiceworld 2016, been home not for terribly long, got off the plane, got off the bus, and I'm home, and Spiceworks decided this year that they weren't going to record the sessions, and so I decided, for those of you that have attended the session, wanted to see the code, see the slides again, I would go ahead and record this at home for you guys and for anyone else who wanted to view this session who maybe didn't get a chance to go. So that's why I'm doing this at home. Also, you noticed my ceiling is not done. You noticed that. All right. I'm going to finish it sometime. I just don't know when. Okay, here we go. So, move me out of the way here. My name is Rob Dunn, and that's my Twitter handle there, MaximilianX. I'm a lead systems administrator. Been an IT pro for about 22 years. Started out at a mom and pop computer shop building beige computers, actually quality assurance tech. And now I'm doing sysadmin work. I've gone through all the desktop support tasks and things like that, and eventually made it up to server administration in 2001. And I'm in healthcare right now. So we have a lot of government regulations and compliance and things we have to deal with, and that is one reason why I'm really getting into PowerShell is for the security aspects of it. But today we're going to talk about toolmaking, so it's kind of related, I guess. I've been in the Spiceworks community since 2007. I had a freeware blog back then where I did a review on the software, and then Jen Slasky, the current, or not current, well, I guess technically the current, but then the then marketing director, reached out to me and has been in touch with me ever since, and that's why I've been involved with Spiceworks in some form since then, which is saying a lot since I have a very short attention span. So the fact that I've been involved in Spiceworks for this long and still retaining the activity that I do is pretty good. As such, I have achieved pure capsation status in 2014. Basically a bunch of fake internet points, but that just means that's another testament for the amount of activity and input I've put out to the community with regards to scripts, SQL reports, how-tos, contributions to the community, plugins, all sorts of resources. So that is my way of giving back to the internet. Trying to there we go. All right, so this session was in fact sponsored by Netwrix. They are a maker of a variety of tools. They have many free products available to them. The QR code that you see right up there will actually take you to a web page with 7 of their most popular free tools. They do offer more than that. But I would say probably the most useful tool out of their free tools, at least that I've used, is their Account Lockout Examiner tool. If you've got user objects that are constantly getting locked out on your domain, you can take this product, point them at your domain controllers, and then it reviews the event logs, and it will tell you what computer those accounts are locking out on, and it'll give you some additional troubleshooting information that would be useful to you, especially if you start enabling some auditing on the workstation level. You'll get all sorts of great information that helps you figure out what's going on. Extremely useful for those times when you have mobile devices that are just kind of hanging out there, rogue devices, maybe the ActiveSync is still connecting to the Exchange server, but the passwords aren't correct, and then you'll start to see that the Exchange server is reporting in information. One interesting thing maybe that would be kind of cool to add to this tool, or maybe another tool altogether that could plug into this, would be some sort of Exchange IIS log examiner, and then you could kind of put the two together. So Michael, CEO of Netwrix, if you're watching this, maybe you can make one of those. So their flagship product that they use, and actually this is a product that I've used for the last couple of years, is their audit program. And you can point it at Active Directory, Azure AD, all these things that I mentioned down below. Office 365, which is kind of a newer feature that they've added. And it will also do NetApp and some EMC. So basically it'll detect any kind of changes in those environments and alert you. So for the example of Active Directory, I have a series of alerts that will tell me if a previously disabled user account has been re-enabled, or if the named administrator account, like the domain just administrator, is being used for some reason or another, it will send me an alert. If somebody adds a computer object to the domain or disables one, it will alert me. It'll tell me who did it when. Pretty good stuff. It's not terribly expensive considering what you get out of it. They have a whole series of canned reports available to you as well that include categories like HIPAA and SOC audits, things like that, and other generic categories like logon information or Active Directory health status, that kind of thing. Good stuff. Has other swath of tools built into it as well, as like video recording on the desktop. Inactive user accounts. It will allow you to perform actions against inactive user accounts and disable, notify, delete, that kind of thing. Nearly expired password notifications, that kind of thing. Check it out. Give it a shot. I think there's a 20-day eval on that. You should really check it out. All right. This is not a Netwrix session, although I might mention them a couple times during the sessions. I'm also going to break this up into two parts. We're going to do the PowerPoint part. There's going to be a distinct cutoff where I'm going to go to bed. And then I will record the coding and demo part, and we'll put that on the end of this, or maybe make it into two videos that you'll watch. Okay, so what we're going to cover is, first off, my take on the difference between a script and a tool. Actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Jeffrey Hicks and Don Jones, the author of the PowerShell Month of Lunches books, consider to be PowerShell tools, the three different types. We're going to talk about tool making with the tool. I'm not talking about me, no matter what your opinion might be of me. We're going to talk about the Microsoft ISE specifically. Then we're going to talk about the genesis of the tool, my thought processes that I go through when I decide whether or not I want to switch that one-liner of code into something that's going to be reusable, a little more useful. And then the demo. The demo will be the second video of this series. So this is number 1. There will be number 2 that goes over the coding part, where we go over a scenario. Every time I move my face around, I got to click on the presentation to get it to go again. All right, so what is a simple script? This is kind of my definition of a script, not necessarily the Bible definition. If you don't agree with it, that's okay. This is just my view. So I consider a script to be, or simple script to be, a file containing a series of runtime instructions which can be executed repeatedly with a relatively specific focus, which produces an expected outcome. Typically, the user running the script doesn't have much, if any, control over the output. So in the case of a logon script, which I would consider to be a simple script, you might have Joe in accounting and John in marketing running the same logon script, getting pretty much a similar result because their user attributes, my friends correct me on this all the time, might be defined as such that it maps the drive directly for them based off that value. So the user really doesn't really control much about that script. Pretty simple. I mean, you can do a lot with those kinds of scripts. That's okay. And you might even consider them a tool of a sort, but that's not really what I consider, for my own purposes, a tool. So Don Jones and Jeffrey Hicks consider 3 different types of tools here. We have an input tool, which basically aggregates some data, gathers information, and then outputs it to something. Typically that is into a functional tool. Functional tool is something that requires input in order for it to produce some sort of dynamic output. Now, the output could be also including what would be like an output tool, or you could write another script that the functional script feeds into that generates information. The output tool is considered to be output because its final form is just that. Its final form is an HTML report, it's an Excel report, it's a grid view or whatever. That's the final stage. Grid view may not be a good example, but anyway, it's the final stage of the information. So what do we use to make our PowerShell scripts and tools? Well, the key here is to use the right tool for the job. We don't want to use Notepad or other text-based editors, because if you do, basically you're doing it wrong. I mean, you can edit your scripts with those editors, and Notepad++, I mean, who doesn't love Notepad++, right? Does have the capabilities of viewing PowerShell and other scripting languages in a way that's so it will highlight the syntax and it'll make it a little bit easier for you to read. There's probably some add-ins as well that would allow you to format the code automatically, but it's not a native PowerShell aware application, just like it's not a native VB scripting application. However, with that being said, I did use Notepad++ to do all my VB scripting work, mostly because of the syntax highlighting. But back then, there really wasn't all the built-in interactivity that PowerShell provides us today. So the key here is use something that is PowerShell aware. A program like Visual Studio Community Edition, which is free, or Microsoft VS Code, which is also free. Kind of a very, very slimmed down, looks very much like Visual Studio, but like very much slimmed down. Or PowerShell, Sapien PowerShell Studio Plus is another good example. The Microsoft ISE is the final example. That's the one that we're going to use in our demo today. But all of these tools have some specific attributes that make them stand out from other basic text editors. So here in our advantages, those programs will easily execute single lines or entire sections of code. Like I said, PowerShell is an interactive scripting environment, which means you can easily execute a single line of code if you want to right out of the script, or you can execute a section, execute individual parts of it. You don't need to run the whole script in order to test things in that script. Unlike VB script or JavaScript, you have to write the whole thing, execute it, and then you see what kind of weird, vague errors that you might get. Not real good. I did not enjoy VB script for that reason. I mean, you could do some powerful and fast things with it, but PowerShell is just so much better with its interactivity and its messaging back to you, telling you what's going on with your script. Next, these tools will allow tab completion of your parameters, properties, and methods. Basically, as you're working, the environment will try to predict exactly what you're trying to do, and it does a pretty good job, and it will provide an IntelliSense dropdown for those things that it can detect. If you're working with an object that's already loaded into memory, hitting a period after that object will drop down a list, and you can pick from a certain number of methods or attributes or properties, whatever. And it helps in a few different ways in that it speeds up your code because you can just tab complete those. It will reduce errors because since you're using tab completion, it spells everything correctly. And it also helps with your syntax as well. It'll start including things like parentheses or brackets where needed. Also, these programs offer more robust debugging and error discovery and syntax highlighting. I mean, we talked about syntax highlighting with Notepad++, but I mean, if that's your only benefit to running Notepad++, then maybe with everything else defined here, we can make a better case for an actual PowerShell aware tool. Finally, a lot of these tools offer add-in support or add-on support, meaning that you can go and download modules or additions to the software in order to enhance your environment to allow you to code either more efficiently in a different way, or simply just by downloading extra scripts and things that you would normally not have access to. And that's a good example with the Microsoft ISE. There is a PowerShell script gallery that you can download, which installs itself on the right side of the screen, and you can do a search for a variety of scripts or tools that other people have written, and you can load it into your environment, edit them to your heart's content, and there you go. So real quickly, I'm just going to show you, if you've never been into the PowerShell ISE, we're going to take a quick look at it here. Oops, I got it open already. It's going to open another one, I bet. Let's see here. Where is it going? There it is. All right, so if you've never opened up the ISE for the first time, you're going to be presented with something that looks like this. Down below here is the commands pane. This essentially is the same thing as the output that is provided to you by either using get command, although get command will show you not only, let's see here if it'll do it. Okay, yeah, it's pretty much the same list. You can also just type in command here too, by the way. Oh, by the way, everyone, I'm running PowerShell 5.0 on Windows 10, if you're concerned about the version that I have. If you're running Windows 7, you could still run PowerShell 5, although the commandlets, you may not have the same commandlets here. So that brings up a good point with PowerShell, is that the number of installed commandlets that you have available to you may depend, or actually does depend, on the operating system, the version of PowerShell you're running, and the installed applications that you have on your system. So in the case of a server, like an Exchange server, you will have your default commandlets that are available to you through the operating system in the PowerShell version, and then you'll have some additional ones because Exchange is installed. So keep that in mind. It's kind of frustrating, really, in some ways, but since I'm running Windows 10 here, I can show you this one. So if I'm going to do a search for get printer, this is a commandlet that is not necessarily available on Windows 7, even if you're running PowerShell 5. Another example is get net adapter here. So get net adapter. Let's see if I can, including, oh, I have to show details. Okay, here we go. Back in the old days, when you wanted to run certain commandlets from different modules, you actually had to import the module. So a good example of this is the Remote Server Administration Toolkit that you would download to install like Active Directory Users and Computers module, or DNS or DHCP, that kind of thing. So what that was doing just now was it was loading up the module. So apparently in the commands pane here, it actually does have to load the module into memory before it will run. Whereas if you're in the console, you could just type it and it would load the module automatically for you. So get net adapter. Let's see what happens if I just run this. Take a moment. Oh yeah, look at that. Load the module. That's what it did up there. Okay, so this is what you see. So Windows 7, you can't do that. So if you wanted that information, you'd have to start using other commandlets to pull that information in a different way. And I think that commandlet that you would use in that case would be get-wmy object. So that's the example. The other thing I wanted to show you was the ability for the AutoSense or the IntelliSense to kick in. And you see here as I'm typing that the little window here started opening up and it showed me a list of things that it thinks I'm going to type based on what I've typed already. So we can type in like get alias dash, and then there are parameters available. Here's another good example, get service dash name, and I hit space, and then now I have a list of services. Now get services is a kind of a special one where it actually can show you a list of services and the names based on the previous parameter that I've defined. Not all commandlets are going to do that. Not all functions will do that. But that was worth pointing out. So the blue thing, your console window. The right thing over here is your commands pane. Typically when I work in PowerShell in the ISE, I just kind of close that. I don't really need that. And then usually what I'll do next is I'll go to View and I'll show Script pane, which you can also hit Control-R, and that brings up this pane here. This is where I do most of my authoring for my scripts. There's tabs up here. You can actually, let's see if I can, where is it at? I think you can do new PowerShell tabs. You can actually break these out so you actually have two different consoles running at the same time, which is kind of handy sometimes. I'll just close that up. So that's kind of how that's laid out. Console window at the bottom shows the output of anything you type at the bottom. Also any output of anything you type up here and execute. Okay. So when I make a PowerShell tool, this is kind of my thought process. I have 4 different modes of thought, I guess. I've got my problem, where I figure out what it is I'm trying to solve. I've got my level of need, like do I really need to do this, or for what reasons do I need to do this? I have my output, which is what do I need the script to do or to produce? And then I have my input. Based on the output, what do I need to give the script in order for it to produce the output? Let me give you an example of a tool that I wrote recently, a very simple one actually, to solve a problem. So in our environment, we have a manual user provisioning process, which basically means that we have a junior sysadmin that generates a new user object in AD, adds that user to groups, sets some security for them, whatever it might be. And then the last part of that creation process is that we create a mailbox for that user on our Exchange server. We have Exchange 2010. So by default, this user is granted ActiveSync and Outlook Web Access permissions by default. Per our policy, because we're a regulated industry, we do not allow Outlook Web Access or ActiveSync to be enabled for these users unless they're signed off by a manager and have special job needs that would require that particular level of access. So our issue is that not all the time are those options turned off. So during routine audits, we'll discover that we have a few users with this Outlook Web Access. Specifically, this is the one problem that we were trying to address at this time, would be enabled when it should have been disabled. Now, for all you Exchange guys out there, I mean, I'm pretty decent with Exchange, but I'm not deep into it. I don't think there's a way that you can set up a policy that you just add the person to the policy and then they don't get Outlook Web Access. I don't think you can do that. So the problem here was, how do we turn that off in such a way so that we can have an automated process run it, or we can have our lower level admin execute it and perform the proper actions on the user account in order to disable that access. Well, we decided that we needed to do something automated, but we also needed to give it some input in order for it to process this stuff. So the level of need was there. We definitely needed it because there was a manual process that was getting missed, and we needed to do something that was consistent and produce the proper results every day. And I say every day because we want this thing to check every day. If some user account was created yesterday with Outlook Web Access, we want to have this thing check for a day-old user account with those permissions and then disable it. Now, you might be wondering, well, what happens if Outlook Web Access is enabled again for that user? Well, and because that user was not created a day before now, like, how do we rectify that? Well, we have the Netwrix Auditor tool, like I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, where it actually produces reports showing me if this Outlook Web attribute is re-enabled or re-added to this user account. I'll get notified via a report. I could set that up to somehow trigger off a script to disable that again, but the report is good enough right now. Our environment is small enough where I can keep track of that stuff. So the output in this case is disabling the Outlook Web Access, and in addition to that, creating a log file saying what it is that the script did. Now, as far as the input is concerned, the input basically is any user accounts created on the prior day with a mailbox associated with them. And that's pretty much it. So today's method that we're going to go over, actually in video number 2, is that we're going to start with a bit of code that we've used once or twice, and we'll build our script around it. So the scenario, we'll talk about that in just a second, was handled at one time with a one-off piece of code, and we're going to use that again. So quick review. The commandlets you must know, really, I mean, these are the 3 that you should know. Martin Pugh and I did a PowerShell 3 introduction course a couple years ago at Spiceworld 2013-14. Actually, for both those years, I believe. And it went over these 3 commandlets in order for you to progress yourself and kind of help self-train in PowerShell. You really need to know these 3. So get command basically allows you to find the commandlet that you're looking for. And you kind of probably notice now a little bit of a pattern. So a few slides back, we went over the demo. Actually, we went over the demo in the ISE where you saw that pane that was down here with all the different commandlets, and you saw this verb noun format like get AD computer, or get content, get service, restart computer, clear. I think there's might be a clear something, I don't know, but anyway, you get the idea. There's verb nouns is how it's set up. So basically Microsoft has made it so that we have this real simple verb noun format that tells you what it is that commandlet does, or what the script does, or the function, or whatever. And the whole idea here is making these things basically singular purpose type of commandlets. Get command does what it says it does. It gets commands. It doesn't format your drive and get command. It doesn't delete services and get commands. That's all it does. And that's done that way for a purpose, because as you start building these scripts and start taking the output of one commandlet and piping them into another commandlet, then you kind of understand there is a logic flow and a structure to this thing, and you understand what's happening just by looking at the code rather than having to kind of dig into what does exactly get command do. And get command does support wildcards. It supports the ability to search by verb or by noun, and again, wildcards are super important. The next commandlet you should know is get-help. Pretty self-explanatory. It gets help. And matter of fact, you can even get help against get help, and you can find out help about the help. Kind of a little, I don't know, a little Inception kind of thing going on there. Anyway, but the first time that you use your help, it's going to be empty. You're going to need to update your help file. Another thing I want to mention too is that when you're doing these things, updating the help file and all that, you want to run your PowerShell console as administrator. Right click the icon, run as admin, and then you can update all your stuff that you need to run with no troubles. Oh, the other advantage here with the help is that Microsoft did not provide you with the help right off the bat because the help documentation is a living document. There's always things being added, removed, or changed that keeps your PowerShell help up to date as much as it can. So I think that's a really great thing. There's always new things happening, and the help file being as it is, it's not like it's not affecting your system performance or anything like that. It's just a bunch of data. So anyway, the last command you should know is get-member. So you can take all these other PowerShell commandlets like get service or get process or whatever, and those things, when you run them, produce a series of objects. And the objects can represent things like services or processes or files or registry items or environment variables or functions, basically anything. Everything that PowerShell handles is an object of some sort. And so what you can do is you can take these objects from one commandlet and we pass it through a pipeline to another commandlet. And one of these commandlets we can pipe those things into is get-member. And get-member, what it does is it looks at the objects and it says, hey, these are the various properties and methods that are associated with those objects. These are the things about the objects. These are the things that we can do with the objects. So objects, PowerShell objects, what are they? Well, here we're going to objectify my friend Scott. My friend Scott has approved the use of his likeness and his name in my presentation, so thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. And so what we've done is we've taken Scott, we've placed him into this object called friend. So Scott, being put into the friend variable here, we've given him some properties. First name Scott, last name Brosnan. Its height is 1.7272 meters. For all you international folks, I've cultured myself on using non-imperial measurements. Funny property is true most of the time. He also has this really weird property of burning under a street lamp because he must be a vampire, not the Twilight kind, but the other kind. Basically, this guy is a ginger and he steps outside for 2 minutes and has a 4th degree burn. So as far as methods, things that we can do with Scott, or Scott can do, so he can complain, he can tell horrible jokes, he can take down a storage array. I've seen that one personally. He can beatbox. Maybe not well, but he can. So down below we have this example of some code here. These are obviously not real codes. This is not real code, but I'm sure we could write something and make our own function if we wanted to. But here on the left we have a variable, and over on the right we have some code here. So we're going to take the output of this entire line of code here, and it gets placed into this friend variable. So the friend variable could represent one thing, it could represent multiple things. So it could be an array, it could be a single item. So here we have this pseudo commandlet called get-friend. It's going to get all of my friends, and the output is contained here by get-friend. Get-friend then passes all the objects, all the friends that it found, into this where object. And this looks a lot like SQL if you've ever used it. And where-object is another commandlet that can evaluate these objects. So it's going to say, okay, out of all those objects, let's look for ones that have the first name that equals Scott. Since I only have 2 friends and one of them's name is Scott, then it finds one item and it puts that into friend. So friend is an array. It's an array of one item. So the first item in the array is Scott. Where's my mouse? There it is. Okay. So then below we have friend performing a method, which is beatbox, for 20 minutes. So for 20 agonizingly horrible minutes, Scott will beatbox. And that's the basic gist of PowerShell objects. So we're going to go over a scenario. Like I said, we're going to do the PowerPoint part of this now, and then if you want to break into the video, it'll be a continuation, or the coding video I should say. It'll be a continuation of this scenario. So we're just going to go over this part, and then I'll cut it off. You can watch the second part at a later time. So our scenario, we have a problem. we have a service account that is experiencing a lockout in the middle of the night. We have the Netwrix lockout examiner running, and it's a true story, I actually do. And then it shows that the service account is getting locked out, and it shows a computer name that it's getting locked out on. So we have the information that we need to query some event logs. So IT needs to gather all the event log entries from the system log, and they want it X minutes before and X minutes after the time of that specified event to see if there's anything else going on. So basically they're looking for some correlations, possibly something causing the lockout or something else being affected by the lockout. This problem has happened a couple times before. The IT manager reached out to me and said, hey, can you check the system event log for blah at a certain time? So here's the key. I have a bit of code that I've saved somewhere else that I used a couple times before, and we're going to build that script, that tool, from that one line of code. So the level of need in this case is that the IT manager has determined that this problem occurs enough times to warrant a closer look at the symptoms by his junior staff being underlined, preferably by using a consistent method also underlined when the problem recurs. So consistency and his junior staff. This means we need to delegate, and this means we need to have an output that we can count on that will be essentially the same type of output every time it's run based on the input. So in our case, the output is that the IT manager wants to have the surrounding event log entries in a view which can be browsed or exported to CSV for further analysis, possibly in Excel, so they can compare them. Well, the thing about PowerShell is that when we export these objects, they can be exported to a number of different output formats, whether it be text on the screen, could be HTML, could be a log file, could be a CSV, could be pretty much anything. There's another output method we're going to use. It's called OutGridView in our coding demo, which really, for all intents and purposes, can be used like Excel. And I just used my laser pointer to point at the, the screen. Anyway, so the OutGridView could be used as its own GUI to do most of this work for our IT manager. The input in this case for the tool will be our parameters, will be date and time of the event that we're interested in. So this would be the date and time that the IT manager has given us as far as the lockout, or we can just use our Netwrix report to get that information. The range of minutes before and after the event to gather other possible interesting information is the other parameter. So we have date and time, then we have range of minutes, basically creating a window of time. So in order to use these parameters, blah, 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 we need to find the event log items X minutes before and after, and then we need to output those to the end user as objects, which is super easy. And if we get time, which we do have time because I'm recording this on my own time rather than being constrained by Spiceworks' 45-minute window, can we get these items from all event logs? And if you've ever looked through the event logs, you know that you don't have just 12. You have literally hundreds of event logs, unless you're still using XP, which you should not be, or Windows 2003. So we will use a specific commandlet that actually can address and take a look at all those event logs. All right, let's code. So this is the end of this section of the presentation. I will record the coding presentation and I will post that as well. If you don't see it posted yet, don't worry, I will get to it, and I'll see you there. We'll probably review a few slides on that as well. So, okay? All right, see you there.